to a technical setback, we apologize for the audio quality on this podcast.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, friends, and anybody within the industry or any other industry that's listening in. Terrible times for everybody, but we've decided to try and do as many podcasts as we can. And today I'm joined by Fabio Gamba, who's the Managing Director at Airline Catering Association, ACA, and also Airport Services Association, ASA, which is the airport services. Now, Fabio, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the initiative.
No problem. Now, before we start, Fabio, I know you're the same as myself. We've got a huge amount of respect and admiration for everybody in the care community, hospital workers, anybody associated with hospitals and care homes, etc., doing an absolutely fantastic job and well done, and our thoughts are with you. And for everybody else that's suffering, please God, things will get better sooner rather than later. So with that said, we're just going to cover now some issues on a particular group of organisations that are supporting the supply chain movement. So Fabio, just a little bit of background. What do you actually do? What do you stand for?
Yeah, thank you for all this and for the question. Before I do answer that, though, I'd like to join you on echoing your thanks to everyone working in the health sector and beyond, and on those who are suffering. I'm, as you may know, half Italian, and I'm seeing the situation in my country with terror. Every day there is a peak in people infected by the virus and people dying, and we thought we had reached that peak already a week ago, and it's still not there. So really, all my wishes to all those who are suffering. And also, if I may extend that to the workers working in this very sector of ground handling and of catering, who unfortunately, like many other so-called white collars, cannot work from home. They have to be at the airport. They have to continue to do what they're doing to help this industry, which is collapsing almost by the hour, a bit more. Continue to operate as much as possible, and who are a absolutely vital element of the transport value chain.
Yeah, I know exactly.
So, sorry for the digression.
No, Fabio, it's
it was a bit
very valuable, Fabio, and there's not enough that we can say for the people that are involved frontline. Absolutely incredible.
Okay, so with respect to your first point, I think I hinted at that. We are representing all the workers working in the service provision to airlines.
Yep.
Right? And that means everything that is below the wing and above the wing. So ground handling is a relatively complex type of activities that range from passenger check-in to de-icing, fueling, cleaning of the aircraft, obviously everything related to the movements of the aircraft while on the ramp, and then also food, in-flight food catering and related aspects. So that's quite a vast amount of activities, and that is a total number of grounds of more than 500,000 workers worldwide doing both ground handling and in-flight catering.
Okay, it covers it's a huge gambit of tasks and responsibilities and services, Fabio, and obviously your sector is hugely hit at the moment. Terrible for everybody.
Yes, it is indeed hugely hit, as is all transport activities, to be honest. It's not only us, it's everyone. Obviously, the airlines are the most visible part of the iceberg, if I may say. Airports follow immediately, but we are just hit as hard as anyone else in the value chain. And it's true that whenever you're thinking of transport or aviation, you always, think first and foremost of the airlines, but rarely of all the others who are making this possible.
Yeah, and it's most people, when they look out the window of an aircraft or they're looking at an aircraft, it's all around where they're sitting and what they're doing, and it's something that the transparency of all the associated and support services that go on with that particular aircraft on ground is phenomenal.
It is, and as I said, it's more than 500,000 people working all around the world. Obviously, you have different situations in different airports, but pretty much the same names everywhere. It's simply that people normally overlook all these activities, and yet they're extremely, I would say, they're even essential to flying into that transport.
Yeah. Now, Fabio, now you've seen how things have rapidly changed, and people were aware of what was happening back in December, when it first kicked off. Why do you think people are now being so shocked and taken by surprise?
Well, I would say it's the same old story. I mean, when you hear about something going on in a foreign country, you look with some distance to what is happening there, and then you tend to believe that it's all the fault of this or that government for not being able to react quickly enough, until you realize that actually, as a matter of fact, it has come to your country, and you are personally impacted yourself, whether through your business or whether through your own health or the health of people close to you. And that's only at that moment that you start realizing, that actually what you were criticizing the others for not doing is valid as well in your own courtyard. The reason why I suppose it is so shocking is that it's really unprecedented, not so much in the fact that it's the first time it happens, because it's not the first time, but certainly because of the speed at which it has taken all of us by surprise, and the deep impact it has not only on the economic network, but also framework, but also on the social one.
Yeah,
and that is totally unprecedented.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing, and and please God, it will start to improve in certain areas, so that everybody else who's going through the peak or coming up to the peak will start to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, there's reports at the moment that there's been no new outbreaks in China. That it was the numbers that they're reporting now are the people that have come into the country, and the fact that you need to have zero findings for 14 days. So who knows whether those reports are accurate or not at the moment, but we need some good positive signs soon, I think. Indeed.
As you say, I think we at least there seem to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They've taken drastic measures for the last month or so, and they start seeing or reaping the benefits of it. Perhaps in Europe, we are a little bit less, I would say, following what our governments are saying. It's perhaps due to our, social and historical or story in general, the way that we're taking our government, requirements and continuity measures. But we're getting there as well. And again, I was referring to Italy, which is the hardest hit country in the world as of now. And I can see that it's start bearing some fruits. So it's we can be hopeful for the future, really.
Good. That's what we want. Now, let's obviously we're neither qualified nor capable to come up with answers or solutions or forecasts. So let's just focus now on the memberships that you have and the people that you represent. How do you think things have to change moving forward once we get back to some sort of a new normality?
Well, that's a tough one, honestly. What I can say is that obviously the air transport industry, and I'm talking about this because that's my area, I cannot talk on behalf of the other industry, obviously.
Of course.
But with respect to air transport, I can see to a certain extent, a certain resilience, but at the same time, a huge fragility of the institutions, of the whole value chain, which depends so much on growth. The moment that growth stops, it becomes really a fragile system, and all the more so when there is degrowth, right? And I think this is symptomatic of an industry that will have to transform.
Yeah.
So it is being now finger pointed for absolutely legitimate reasons from an environmental perspective. People argue that we haven't done enough in terms of environmental footprints. Also attacked from a financial perspective, saying that the whole industry is not sustainable. It is also being attacked from an operational perspective. So it is really, I think, at the forefront of a number of things, and perhaps by trying to reconstruct the whole thing, we might want to look at the way it is being articulated in a slightly different perspective. So I wouldn't say it's a great opportunity to do that. We would have loved to have more, not only time, but certainly also in different circumstances. But I would imagine that a number of questions will have to be posed, and certainly from our perspective as well.
Yeah, and like you said, under different circumstances, that we'd like to have a different motivation to push and drive change. But we are where we are now. Do you think that? And you mentioned sustainability there and responsibility. There's a responsibility and a sustainability to survival of some of the services and some of the businesses, and some of the pricing pressures that have been put on in the past may or may not have led to things not being done the way they should have been done, or things being overlooked, or shortcuts. And I think this particular exercise will make everybody now focus more on real safety, real security, and real risk. And, training, making people more aware, making people care more. I think, some of these initiatives now are going to have to be done moving forward. What do you think?
Well, I would tend to agree. Now, the only thing that I would want to add up to what you just said is that in terms of safety, I think we were already trendsetters. I think aviation industry has always been extremely safe. Continuously being safe throughout the time. So that has never, in my humble opinion, been the issue at stake. To me, the issue really is the way that perhaps and I'm not sure I can really put my finger on it, but perhaps the way that the whole value chain is being treated in the way that obviously there is a race to the bottom for service provision. You tend to hail those who are doing things properly according to standards and stuff like that. And then, behind the doors, you're opting for those who are proposing a cheaper service. Simply because you have to, cut your costs all the time, in all the areas that you can. And hence, it's nice to try and come up with all the standards of the world that you can, but then if you're not following them yourself, then it's getting difficult. And I probably am not making myself very clear. I realize that. I'm now more looking with my catering and run handling goggle. But it's true that in these two respective sectors, we've really seen in the last 10 years a race to the bottom. Because of the pressure that our customers are putting on ourselves in terms of cutting prices and cutting costs.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think some of the initiatives that have taken place over the last couple of years, maybe last 18 months, and some of the IATA initiatives as well, I think if it was to be pushed further, so that the public, procurement departments, etc., they were made more aware of who's actually investing in what areas and why they're investing in those areas, and those investments should be commended and used as part of the selection process in awarding contracts. Because I agree with you, far too often certain things are spoken about, they're given as directives, they're put in SGHAs and various complex SLAs, but the practicalities are not being followed. And I think perhaps now is the time to allocate, whether it's a quota or a ratio or whatever of the cost, has to be evidenced by being invested in the correct areas.
That's correct. I would definitely subscribe to that, obviously. I have to say that IATA has done a fantastic job in the past and currently continues to do so in trying to come up with standards. We as ASA and ACA are working hand in hand with IATA, but that is not enough. I think we obviously have to improve these standards. But then, and I would say this is the most important area and the most urgent one to cover, it is then related to implementation and to follow-up.
Yep.
Once we have a standard, what is the degree to which airlines, GHSPs, ground handlers, and caterers do implement it, do respect it, and are trying to match with what they say. And that's really where we need to spend more time in the future.
Totally agreed, and especially now, I say today's day and age. It was probably better to say yesterday's day and age. With attrition levels and people moving, if they see an opportunity primarily for finance rather than career development or for a structure, etc., and also the 0 hours workers and subcontracted workers, it's so important that they get the correct base level of training, which obviously costs money and takes time.
Indeed, that is really one of the weak spots of the industry. As I said, this is probably one of those, results, results of this race to the bottom that I was talking about before.
Yep.
I think the industry is very well aware of that, to be honest, and we really welcome the work that the EASA, the safety agency in Europe, is doing in terms of rulemaking in order to sort of give a legal framework to all of that, and in order to recognize the training that ground handlers or caterers at this stage is mostly ground handlers have been following, and they do that with a safety perspective, which I think is the right perspective to look at.
Yep.
So once you're binding the level of training and the level of professionalism, if you will, from the team, and you're linking that with the safety, then you can sort of force a virtuous circle in the whole training of the team, and I think it's a good thing. It has to be said that EASA is the first instance that I know of that is doing this, and we are really collaborating, on a day-to-day basis with EASA in order to come up with a meaningful piece of legislation that is normally going to be presented to the European Commission and then to the member states for adoption at the end of 2021 or early 2022. So it's like tomorrow, and I'm really hopeful that with that we'll have a very robust template that other countries will want to follow, and that will really help boost the not only the training but all the way that ground handlers and caterers are working on the ramp and beyond.
Yeah, no, fully agreed. And I think in the selection process, whether it's legislation or whether it's good common governance and housekeeping, some of the practical testing needs to be having a higher criteria with the selection process. So if it's to do with training, the training element should have multiples of higher credits rather than just the pricing issue or the manuals, etc. And I think competency testing and the level to which we ensure that we've actually done our duty of care is important within that particular exercise.
That's very true. What we are also discussing at this very stage is that we would like a particular set of training to be recognized by the whole industry as having been applied to this person. So, in other words, that a person having gone through this or that training in particular can then leave the company with that as a baggage that would be recognized by any other company who would want to hire this person.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm saying this. Sorry.
Yeah, no, 100%, Fabio. I think that is so important so that people can actually see a value as well. And it's also something that if they're working for a company who keeps training them in the correct way, it's a great value to stay with that company. And they should be made aware of things that they should be asking if another company is offering them a new position. Because at the end of the day, they have to secure their futures as well. And to do that, you need to be working for an organisation that's got a good, sustainable approach to the way they deal with their own business.
Indeed. And all that is going in the right direction. So, these are little things, and they may look obvious to most of the people, but actually these are relatively new to the industry. And that's why it's so important that we can have the right legal framework in order to implement them. Yeah. And that's why we're hopeful that EASA's efforts are going in the right direction with our help.
Oh, very good. Now, just keeping on the same subject of training, I had a telephone call this morning from somebody I know quite well and their company. And what they're doing now is they're looking at some of their most popular training courses to actually start doing online and through different social apps, etc., to make sure that people have got access to training at a much lower cost. It's primarily targeted at anybody that's being asked to take leave without pay, or some poor people who are losing their jobs, etc. And one of the things that he said was that if there was a standard 5-day course, they're now spreading it over 4 weeks, so that there's various dial-ins, there's Q&As, there's FAQs, there's sessions that they can actually get direct with the instructor. Some of it's done over video, some of it's done over different solutions. But what they're also asking to do is, with the drop in the cost for the training, is to support local care charities, whether it's hospitals, whether it's community homes, etc., by paying an amount to their chosen charity. I just thought that was a great idea, and one that, there's so many people going to be working from home or staying at home now. They need to occupy themselves. It's very, very flexible. It's a modern way of doing things, and it's perhaps a way that things are going to have to change on a more permanent basis in the future.
That's brilliant, and kudos to them. Obviously, I would be extremely supportive of any new means to provide and offer training to our people. It's excellent, and certainly ASA and ACA are looking into a new means to do that. We were discussing with a number of institutions that are offering novel ways of training. That's all good. What I'm mostly interested in, to be really frank with you at this stage, is not so much the way that the training is being provided, is more what the training is made of.
Yeah.
And I think at this stage, we've not yet reached, again, one of the standards that I was mentioning before, that is fully recognized throughout the world. And yet the requests for our work normally should be similar, whether you're on the tarmac in South America, in China, or in Europe, right?
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Safety would have to be applied in the same way if it wants to be effective. So I think, all the methods that are being proposed today, the modern methods, are more than welcome. But I would say let's spend some more time on trying to make sure that we can come up with a standard training package that is being recognized as valid throughout the world by the authorities, and as well, and I would say first and foremost, probably by the airlines themselves.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like SLAs and contracts, and everybody wants to do their own thing, and mainly it's because they reflect on things that happened in the past and they just stick them in just in case. And I think everybody now has got a moral, an ethical, and a professional duty to start simplifying things to allow the people who are on the front line to do it consistently and to do it consistently well. And that needs to be driven by everybody.
That's very true. I would agree with that. It's true that over the years the SLAs have become ever more complex. I mean, one thing that we have to recognize though is that, and that is somehow not only a good thing but a legitimate and normal thing, is that airlines realize that there are differentiators out there, that they're all offering the same commodity, which is to fly you from point A to point B.
Yep. But
there are different ways to do so, right? So whilst using the same type of aircraft, because it's not like you have a lot of choices out there, you basically have a duopoly, you may change the passenger experience by doing this or that. And that's what is somehow reflected in the SLA. So the fact that SLA will remain quite different from one from the other is not only normal, it is widely anticipated, and we're fine with that. Actually, that's the way it should be. But it's true that on a number of aspects, they could be simplified,
yeah.
And that's exactly what we tirelessly are working with our friends and colleagues in IATA and trying to come up with templates that can be acceptable by the vast majority, both of ground handlers, caterers, and airlines. It's easier said than done, but I'm feeling, and I'm probably or perhaps being too optimistic, that we're making some progresses. But that obviously that is being said without preempting the ends of this current crisis. We don't know how long this will protract. We don't know how fast this industry will be able to get back on its feet, if at all, and hence we don't know the effects of this on all the programs that we were just before the crisis working on with IATA and the ACI.
Exactly. But when we do get back, and it's good to be optimistic. It's always good to be optimistic. So fair play to you, Fabio. But when we do get back, I think it's important that we get back as quickly as possible, as simply as possible, and that we have less complexity. So people should be a little bit bigger than their own backyard and be looking at the whole region or the whole area and try and make things a lot easier for when things do start coming back. And that's why the real basics of an SLA, the basics of what the prerequisites are, as you said, they're the same wherever there's an aircraft landing and taking off. And that should be done and really focused on so people can see that there's clarity and less confusion, because I've attended so many meetings and conferences and the frustration levels they're unacceptable and they're unnecessary. So people now need to be bigger and better than just their own position.
That's true. If I may chip in on what you just said, we're talking about recovery, hopefully very soon. I think there is a caveat I'd like to share with you regarding that in particular. If the governments are coming up with all sorts of relief measures and they're all welcome in any form, in any way that they can come, I think it's very important that the authorities remember that we're talking about a whole value chain of air transport here, not only about airlines and or airports.
Yep.
And that I'm not saying only this because I'm representing the service provision, but also because it makes a lot of sense. If you're only privileging one or two actors or stakeholders in the whole value chain to the detriment of the others, we estimate that we need around 3 months, perhaps even more so, to hire someone to form him and then to have him accepted, to work at the airports.
Yep.
And so if we have to continue to lay off people at the speed and rate that we have so far, unfortunately, with our with deep regrets. It is possible that when things go back to normal, we may have to wait 2 to 3 to 4 months before we can resume, to where we were before, and that would have a knock-on effect, obviously, on the rest of the value chain. So I'm just saying that we need to, remind ourselves that we're talking about a complex value chain here, and that is not only the airlines who are flying or the airports who are welcoming them, it's also all the people behind that who are making this possible.
Exactly, and I think something that you said earlier about governments looking at the entire supply chain, if they are, and I think everybody agrees they must and they should do, offer certain support programs. This is also a great chance for them to introduce or to instigate a certain code of practice with that particular relief program. Things like anybody that has been laid off who's got the qualifications should be the first ones re-employed and taken back into the industry. It should be certain simplified procedures. It should be certain areas where costs then are not being eaten away because of administration or trivia, and it should be on frontline benefits. So the governments themselves, with key parties like yourself, they've got the chance now to come up with a code of practice of what this relief program means and what parties have got to do who are receiving the benefits of the relief program. So I think it's a great opportunity to streamline when things do start coming back as to what should happen, but especially to protect the people who've already lost jobs and some who will lose jobs, that they should be the first ones who are brought back into the industry because they've got their security passes done, they've had their checks done, they've got their training. So I think, and coming back to this training offline, it's not a bad thing for people to be signing up now for either low cost or training, or for some of the companies who are laying people off to give their employees that training and pay for it, because it's a lot lower rates than they would have done if they had to put them into a classroom and they're not losing the time from the person themselves.
That's very true, and that's very thoughtful. I would definitely agree. Just 2 comments quick. The first one is these people are obvious candidates for getting the job as soon as things go back to normal, because, as you say, they've already worked in the sector, they know how it works, and they've already been trained. And though these particular types of training might not be fully recognized, they still have the training. So I think they are the most obvious, the most likely candidates to be hired again.
Yep.
But that is preconditioned on 2 things. The first one is that things go back to normal, and we all hope that they will very soon. And the second is that these people are still available, because obviously these people are, by definition, not very transferable. I mean, they tend to be looking for a job where they live, obviously, you would say, but perhaps more so for these people. And so they would simply, given their conditions, take everything that comes, to their hands. And we've seen that, in the past as well. Many times when people are leaving, it was not to come back. The working conditions, I must confess, are tough. They're difficult. You have to work in the cold. You have to work in the rain. You have to work at night. And hence, it's not everyone's cup of tea, if I may say. So that's certainly one aspect. The second aspect is, yes, indeed, governments should be made aware of that. That's our job. That's what we're trying to do every day, to try and educate these governments to say, here, we exist, we are there, we do matter, not only for the value chain or the air transport value chain, but also for the economy, also for the country itself. Air transport is always and legitimately so valued as strategic assets of a country. But despite all that, we're still not visible enough, and governments still very often overlook these two sectors, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you're right. And Also, I think to be fair, and I've watched Boris, and I've watched most of the European leaders with their announcements, and I got to say, you can see the strain on their faces, and the real pressures that they're under, and I think opposition parties now should rally round and not be doing the normal shenanigans and restrictions and counter arguments, etc. Everybody now needs to push and drive, because we've been talking about getting back to normal, but I think there's definitely going to be a new normal. It's not going to be what we would have expected and what we would hope for. And I think people now need to rally round and become one team everywhere, globally, for the good of everybody, because this has been such a shock. Fabio, thank you so much. Is there a last message you'd like to give?
No, perhaps just to echo what you just said, the very end, i.e. that there's going to be a new normal. Indeed, and I very much regret it. Believe me, that obviously we've already lost a number of companies, and we will continue, unfortunately, to do so in the coming days and weeks. And so, no matter what, the new normal would definitely be a new one, because there would be a lot of stakeholders which would have disappeared back then.
Yep.
So perhaps as a conclusion, I would simply say that whenever things are back to normal, that we need to be mindful of these circumstances, and we need to remember and act as in consequence, and not simply do as if nothing happens and continue our way. So that is just to echo what you just said. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad to take any opportunity to try and bring some more light on this rather sometimes obscure part of air transport.
Yep.
And remind everyone that this is a part of air transport without which people would not be able to fly. So we've done to do that.
Exactly, Fabio. Yep. And such a valuable supply chain it is, with products and eventually vaccines and everything else that needs to be distributed to those that need it. Fabio, thank you very, very much indeed. Really appreciate you coming on. Good luck with everything that you're doing. And when the new normal comes back into place, we'd love to have you on and have you on a face-to-face.
It will be with pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Stay safe and good luck with everything that you're doing. Thank you, Fabio.
Cheers. Likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye.